Being both an artist and a mystic, I find myself naturally searching for things that unify those two worlds. So it should be no surprise that the Salon de la Rose Croix, organized by fin de cycle provocateur Joséphin Péladan, interested me profoundly when I discovered them. Like so many people across the world, I'm fascinated with French culture, but this particular era of the late 1800s, which gave rise to so many incredible movements, of which the reverberations are still being felt in modern society, is something that piques my interest. There were many occult figures that came into prominence at that time, like Gérard Encous, aka Papoose, who did a lot for movements like Martinism and Gnosticism. But Peladan was his contemporary and at one point collaborator until they parted ways due to ideological differences. But Peladan was also influential. He was even the originator of adopting Tsar as a ritualistic title. So why does the English-speaking world know so little of this man who was responsible for the salons? Je ne sais pas. A few years after learning about the Rosicrucian Art Salons, I came across the book Occult Paris, Lost Magic of the Belle Epoque by Tobias Churton, which was a well-crafted immersion into the fin de siècle scene that I enjoyed immensely. This opened my eyes to the magnitude of influence that Peladon had, making me even more curious about this eccentric mastermind. Not too long after that, I saw a video by Dr. Sasha Chaitow sharing an extract from her doctoral thesis, setting the stage for what would eventually become her book, Son of Prometheus, which is the subject of today's video. History, and those who tell it, have been more inclusive to people like Papoose, but far less so to Peladon. But recently, Dr. Chaitow, who is also an artist, in addition to being a historian, and the book's author, has been working on reviving an interest in this intriguing, eccentric personality of Tsar Merodach, aka Joséphin Péladan. Today, I'll be reviewing this long-awaited book, which chronicles the ups and downs, adventures and misadventures of Peladon. Alors, prenez votre café ou votre thé, détenez-vous, et c'est parti! The story the author tells of how the book Son of Prometheus came to be is fascinating in its own right. It could have almost never happened had fate kept her on the course of her original proposition. However, a curious sequence of events unfolded, which to me seems like the universe wanted this story to be told, and Sasha accepted the mission. Now, the fact that this book emerged from a doctoral thesis gives the overall tone of the book a very scholarly and academic feeling, while still managing to be quite an interesting read. This is not a romanticized biography, nor is it a grimoire of occult teachings. It is, however, a well-thought-out chronicling of the major events in the life of Joséphin Péladan, as well as an acknowledgement of the philosophies that inspired him, how he synthesized these influences to create his personal philosophy, which he then poured into his work. And also, I look at how all of this factored into the context of the influences of the era in which he was living in. Perhaps one of the most important attributes of this work is that it was written in the English language, which many of us Anglophones appreciate. So, thank you for doing that. The introduction to the book gives us the overview of the man and the era, while thoroughly critiquing some of the existing works from other authors who perhaps had some biases regarding Peladon himself or with regards to occultism in general. Dr. Chaitow makes her case as to why this entry is unique in comparison to the others, especially considering her background in the study of the philosophy of Western esotericism. Each chapter of the book, including the introduction, is broken up into several subsections, which is extremely helpful if you're going to be using this as a reference book, because while there is a picture index for all of the beautiful illustrations from the author, in this limited edition printed volume, however, there is no index of terms. I do believe, though, that there should be a PDF index forthcoming, so if that is something that interests you, just keep an eye out for it on the publisher's website. Chapter 1 deals with Peladan's life from his early childhood years and his family background, Rosicrucian activities, the Salons, his romantic life, and his existential crisis while traveling in Egypt, and essentially his life's work up until his death in 1918, concluding with the author's summation of his life. Chapter 2 looks at some of the immediate influences on Peladan, specifically the esoteric current tied to the geographical location of his origins, the lives of his father and brother, both of whom were mystics in their own right, with his brother Adrian being the person who initiated Joséphin into the branch of Rosicrucians in Toulouse. I admire that Dr. Chaitow portrayed Peladan with the spirit of integrity. We see the man as a person, sans the embellishing or diminishing of character that can potentially occur with the treatment of historical icons. From what I can tell, the author's opinions seem objective and fair in her attempt to resolve previous misconceptions of Peladan and rehabilitate his image. Chapter 3 deals with the influences of the fin de siècle and how philosophies from Jacob Boehme, Rosicrucianism, Antoine Fabre d'Olivet, and others came into contact with Joséphin and helped to shape his outlook. This chapter also details the lineage of Peladan's Rosicrucian affiliation and explains the way how that caused him to approach his work. It sheds a good deal of light on why Peladan met his projects with such fervor, and then we get to chapter 4 and see how all of those things come together to form Peladan's cosmogony. From that point forward, the book dives deeper into Peladan's philosophy, the Assyrian symbolism that he pulled from, his methodology and personal mandate to make the occult accessible to the masses. On that point, Dr. Chaitow says this in the introduction. His occult philosophy was a synthesis, deriving first from his unorthodox upbringing, incorporating his father's enduring interest in world mythology and Orientalism, Platonic and Neoplatonic thought, and biblical legends of the fall. Peladan indeed eschewed secrecy in adapting esoteric teachings for the public as part of what he perceived as his Rosicrucian duty. He also qualified the nature of esoteric secrecy. And this sort of gives you an idea of how Dr. Chaitow presents Peladan in Prometheus. Furthermore, throughout the entirety of the book, she gives evidence of him being a forward-thinking visionary, even with respect to ideas about gender and sexuality. Peladan viewed art as a means to awaken humanity and elevate our consciousness. He even saw art as a means to redeem fallen angels, according to his philosophy. Peladan brought a lot to the table, and by all accounts, he was a flamboyant character and a man outside of his time, whose hijinks might have at least contributed in a small way to his undoing. He earned the ire from his esoteric contemporaries for wanting to make the occult teachings available to everyone. Nevertheless, the world has seen far worse controversial characters than him who have arguably contributed less to the world's stage, so I feel like by now the man should at least be on your radar. In Prometheus, Dr. Chaitow strongly asserts that Peladan may have also been a victim of sabotage from some of his contemporaries that he had antagonistic relationships with. She names Oswald Wirth, who was also an occultist, tarot deck creator, and Freemason, as someone who may have had an axe to grind with Peladan, and used his influence to actively work to erase Peladan from history. Dr. Chaitow also names the notorious British occultist Aleister Crowley as yet another person who may have had something to do with the relegating of Peladan to the dark crevices of history, noting that there are some similarities between Peladan's Order du Temple de la Rose Croix and Crowley's OTO. As I've also stated, Dr. Chaitow is adamant that Peladan has been misunderstood and mischaracterized by other historians as well, and she attempts to correct these errors by providing us with very thorough, convincing research. It is interesting to me that the life of Peladan and his reputation that has been preserved through history seems to mirror his own Gnostic Promethean philosophy. So there you have it, the life and work of Joséphin Péladan, son of Prometheus by Sasha Chaitow. If you are an artist yourself, if you have an interest in the Western esoteric tradition, I think that this book is something that might help you to expand your perspective. Peladan was the founder of the famous Salon de la Rose Croix for painters, writers, and musicians. He was a novelist who wrote over 100 books, and a playwright, a Kabbalist, and the founder and co-founder of 2 Rosicrucian groups, the first being the Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Croix with Stanislas de Goita and Papus, the second being Ordre du Temple de la Rose Croix. He was indeed a star-crossed but prolific figure, which is now getting another opportunity for recognition. If Peladan were alive today, I wonder what he would think about how information is accessible through the internet and other media. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in hearing another review of this book from another source, just to get another opinion, you can check out the Foolish Fish channel. I've left a link to everything in the description, including Sasha's original art. My name is Wayne from Rodney Illustrations. I am the creator of the Global Fusion Intuitive Tarot, published by US Games Systems. Wishing you all the best, peace, and blessings.